So when I was 16, I went to my first ever race with my friends. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was the summer before I started college, and I was hanging out with my friend from high school who I hadn't seen in a while. We were just catching up and having drinks at this little pub near our high school. And he was telling me about how he had season tickets to go see a race. And that there was an upcoming race that weekend, and he was like, "Dude, you should totally come." I was like, "Hell yeah, I'd love to." But really inside, I was freaking out because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. He picked me up in his daddy's old pickup truck, and we drove about an hour to get to the track. When we got there, I was blown away by the huge crowds and all the cars and the noise. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I don't think I've ever seen so many people in one place before. And it wasn't just like a bunch of rednecks either. There were all types of people there. We parked the car, and then we had to walk like 10 minutes to get into the actual track area. And by the time we got to the entrance, it was already packed. The only place that had any seats left was like way up in the top row of these grandstands. So we sat down and we were just looking at all the cars driving around below us. I got to say the coolest part of the whole thing for me was seeing all the different types of cars that were there. There were these monster trucks that would just crush everything. Then there were these other trucks that looked like they were from the future. They were like white and had no grill, and they sounded like a jet taking off. And then there were these stock cars that looked like they were from the 50s. And then there were also those cool dragster cars. And each type of car had its own distinct sound that I could easily identify now if I heard it. But I have to admit that after a while, it kind of got boring just sitting there watching the same cars go by over and over again. I mean, there were like 400 cars or something, and they would race in groups of 3, and then the fastest one would move on to the next round. So we watched the same cars that were in our group go by about 4 times. And since we were so high up in the stands, it was hard to see who won most of the races. So we were constantly looking down and then back up to see the results on this little screen. And after a while, my butt got really sore from sitting on these hard wooden bleachers. And I was also super thirsty, but I didn't want to leave my stuff there and go down to the concession stand and get in line and then come back up. So I was like, screw this, let's go down there. When we got down there, it was super easy to get a beer. They didn't even ask me for ID. I think they just assumed that everyone there was old enough to drink because the guy next to me was like 20 and looked like he was 50. And the entire time I was just worried that someone was gonna try to steal my beer while I was walking back up the stairs to the stands. I mean, I had seen enough action movies to know that that's what always happens in the movies. Anyway, we got back up to our seats, and we were just watching the races and drinking our beers and having a good time. After a few more races, it started to get dark outside, and they had this big fireworks show. It was probably the best fireworks show I've ever seen. Every time a car would cross the finish line, they would launch a rocket into the air. And the best part was when they launched this giant one that looked like a mini missile. It was so awesome. After the fireworks, they had this concert. I forget who it was, but it was some country band. And then they had this monster truck rally thing where they crushed some cars and stuff. That was pretty cool. And then after that, they had these dragster cars racing on the track. And that was probably the coolest part of the whole night for me. I loved the sound that these cars made as they were accelerating down the track. It was like a jet engine. And that was pretty much it for the night. We packed up and left and headed back to his dad's truck. We were both exhausted and we fell asleep on the drive home.